Dave Weinberg. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mike. How's it going?
All is well. Dave Weinberg, of course, from the Press of Atlantic City, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. I actually ran into Dave twice this weekend. I saw you Friday night at the fights and Saturday at the college basketball games. It was a great sports weekend in Atlantic City.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that sorely needed too. I mean, it's good to see Cage Fury back, and of course the college basketball was a welcome surprise. I was really happy to see the crowd turn out the way they did.
Yeah, I saw your column. What was that Sunday about the crowds over there? They're saying that there's a good. I agree with you. I thought I was a little surprised at the crowds. They were pretty steady. I wouldn't say they were great, but they were steady for the four teams. Some of which were not really from this region. So I was pretty happy to see that there was a steady stream of crowds. Did you get a chance to talk to anybody from the hall? Were they happy with the crowds?
Yeah, actually, I talked to a bunch of people. I talked to a guy from the CRDA, from Boardwalk Hall, and they were very satisfied. Like you said, it wasn't like a huge crowd for any of the games, but if you put them all together, I think every team had a pretty good fan base there to root for them, and they were very encouraged, and hopefully I know that the people that put on the event, they want to make it an annual tradition, kind of like the Maui Classic, and hopefully they can find a way to get that done, because that'd be a tremendous event for.
Are they booked to be back here next year yet, or is that to be determined?
No, it's to be determined. That was a 1-year deal with the Hall of Fame, but I'm hopeful that they'll find a way to like I said, maybe work out some sort of multi-year deal where they can have different teams, different and make it an annual event.
Yeah, and then great crowd for the fights on Friday night. That's the first time I had ever been to like a regional promotion like that.
Okay.
That was pretty cool. I mean, it was definitely cool in the role that I was in, but even taking myself out of that role, the electric in that room, and I thought the presentation was way further advanced than I would have thought.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, yeah, Cage Fury does a really good job. Ring of Combat, same thing. There's a couple other outfits that also do a very good job. But they know how to stay in their lane. The mistake that some organizations have made is they try to compete with the UFC, and you just can't do it. But if you get you get fighters with strong followings, like they had at Cage Fury. People from like the Northeast region in particular, and you put them in competitive bouts, people are going to show up. And, that's Cesar Balmaceda did a tremendous job. The Atlantic City homegrown kid winning the interim title. So that was great to see, because I know how hard he's worked to get to where he is.
Yep, it was a great event, and I think they're coming back to Atlantic City pretty soon. Might have some details on that coming up, and they're going to be in the Philly area. So a couple of fights in the area for that. And then, of course, we got the Eagles. And you wrote a couple of weeks ago, Dave, that maybe it was time to turn to Nick Foles, even before Carson Wentz was kind of ruled to be injured.
Yeah, I took a lot of flack for that too, but turns out maybe I knew what I was talking about. I don't know, but yeah, I just thought that Nick could give that team a spark that they were lacking. Nothing against Carson. I know he's going to be a tremendous quarterback, the franchise quarterback of the future, and he's going to be there for a decade. But for right now, for what they needed to keep their playoff hopes alive, I thought they needed a little jolt, and I thought that Nick could deliver that, and it turns out that he did.
What do you
Was that
think?
predicated, though, on you knowing, Dave, that just because of you watching and seeing and knowing the game, that just something was wrong with Carson Wentz beyond mechanics? Like, the injury was the catalyst to cause these issues, so you thinking, all right, well, clearly there's something injury-related wrong with Carson. That's what motivates you to now go to Nick Foles?
Not injury-related necessarily. I just knew that there was something wrong. There's just something that wasn't clicking there. That the offense had too much talent to be kind of like bogged down the way they were, and I couldn't put my finger on it. But I do know that Nick is capable of providing an energy and enthusiasm and excitement. And maybe it's just the fact that because he's not as talented as Carson, it seems like maybe the rest of the offense kind of picks up their game a little bit. Maybe the problem was that they were relying on Carson a little bit too much, waiting for him to carry the team on his shoulders. Whereas with Nick, they know they have to step up their games. They know they have to try and help them out. And I thought that was the case against the Rams, definitely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what is it about when Foles play that you think is clearly different about this team that they seem to respond?
Yeah, they do, and it started. He definitely showed it in the playoffs last year, and even he alluded to it today that he knows that he can't do this himself. He knows that it takes and even it's hard to say, but I mean it takes even more of a team approach. The offensive line really steps up their game, although Nick does a very good job of getting rid of the ball. He doesn't try to make plays when there's nothing there necessarily. But he also has enough confidence in himself that he's willing to take some chances once in a while, as you saw with the 50-yard pass to Alshon Jeffrey. He's not afraid to chuck it down the field. He's not necessarily looking for the first option all the time. He's willing to gamble when he thinks that it's beneficial. And I just thought even the running game wasn't much of a factor, but they made yards when they had to. And he did a great job of spreading the ball around. I think he completed passes to 8 different receivers. So it's just that he just seems to work very well with those guys, and they seem to respond to whenever he's out there.
You mentioned the Jeffrey aspect. Like, to me, that was one big difference, is that they were taking the shots. And Mike Groh said yesterday, well, no more than we usually do. Okay, maybe not, but you were completing them. That's something that you weren't doing before.
Right, and if you remember, like Doug last week was saying how if you play quarterback in this league, you know to take what defenses give you. So that's the reason why Carson was dumping the ball off so much. He's throwing 5-yard passes and 10-yard passes, and only had he had half the amount of 40-yard completions that some of the other quarterbacks had. So, but you don't always. You can't tell me that the defenses are willing to give you 40-yard completions. You have to take them when you think they're there. You have to be willing to risk it every once in a while. And Nick has that reputation as a gunslinger. He's not afraid to gamble when he thinks it can pay off.
Dave Weinberg from the Press of Atlantic City here. The defense the other night. I mean, they were, Schwartz has been maligned at times, but I mean, they're kind of getting their bearings under them late here. Do they have enough left in the tank, this defense with Nick Foles, to sweep and win this thing out and make it at least a full 16-week season?
It's a possibility. I mean, I had picked the Rams to win, as did almost everybody, only because I thought the secondary just wasn't going to be able to handle Jared Goff and company. Turns out, Avonte Maddox played out of his mind. Even Kervon LeBlanc had some big plays, and so maybe they're getting a little bit healthier. Getting Maddox back was big. Hopefully, they'll be getting Jordan Hicks back pretty soon. If they can, I think it's going to be tough. There's only 2 games left. I think they might run out of time. The Texans are an awfully tough team. I think if they can find a way to get past them, then maybe they have a shot at really actually getting into the playoffs. But I think it's going to be really tough these last 2 weeks, especially this week coming up.
Do you think that there is anything remotely close that could look at the next 2 weeks of this team where they do find a way, they do find some backdoor way into the playoffs where they're good enough? Last year, right, Dave, the question was about the quarterback. We already knew they had a top offense. They had a top 3 defense for the majority of the season. But right. I'm trying to ask you a hypothetical that balances your knowledge of the team on the field with the knowing that this league, when you catch fire the last 4 games into the season and that propels you into the playoffs, that can overcome and maybe offset some of the issues. Are they good enough to actually do something in the playoffs, in your opinion, with knowing that they would have to win 4 straight games to get in there?
Right.
Or 3, technically, sorry.
That's a tough question.
And I know, Dave, it's hypothetical, and I'm putting you in a situation that's kind of not exact.
I think they're capable of it. I don't think they can do it, only because if you get that 6th seed, you're probably going to have to play Chicago Bears in Chicago, and I just don't see them winning that game at all. I mean, but then again, I don't think there was any reason they could beat the Rams either. But it's awfully tough for a wild card to go on the road, win 3 games, I guess, on the road, right? So,
yes.
and it means you're going to be having to beat the Bears and maybe the Saints and maybe the Rams back to back to back. That's a really tall order. That's not to say it's not impossible,
right?
But
can you imagine if they beat Chicago in Chicago with Nick Foles after they had already won 3 straight? Dave, this city would be celebrating like they already won the Super Bowl again.
Oh, heck yeah. I mean, Nick could run for mayor. They'd sign in for 10 years, I think.
Dave, do you see any scenario where Carson plays again this year?
That's a tough one, too. I don't think so. I think that I just don't see how you can go back to him. I understand the rationale. I know Carson's the more talented quarterback, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the fans could let them. I mean, the fans would revolt, I think, if Foles somehow beats the Texans, then beats the Redskins, looks good doing it. You know, the city's on fire, the team's all excited. I don't know how you go back to Carson at that point. I think you have to ride with Foles the whole way.
Well, don't you run risk of upsetting the balance in the locker room as well? Because clearly, this is not, hey, Josh McCown's coming to take over. This is a guy who won a Super Bowl last year with a lot of the same people on the field that had just gone through battle again with Foles.
Right. There's a school of thought that that they need to have Carson come back there to make him feel better and to get him some playoff experience. And but I don't buy that at all. I'm with you. You ride with Foles. I mean, if he's the guy that got you there, then you got to. And he's the guy that took you to the top last year. I don't see any way that you bench him.
Does this have any kind of that Jeff Garcia feel when he played? I mean,
06?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and then the next
they
year,
did lose to New Orleans that year, right?
Right, but they got hot as can be to get to the playoffs after. I mean, they were dead in the water. They got blown out by Indianapolis one night, and they were 5-6, and then they won 3 straight games in the division and went on to the playoffs. But they had to get Jeff Garcia out of here because it would have been anarchy if they brought him back the next year.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that. I remember that game like it was yesterday. And coming off the field, Merry Christmas, Philadelphia. The town went bonkers. They probably should have beaten the Saints in the playoffs too. I think, if I remember correctly, wasn't that the game where the guy jumped off sides? Scott Frank, I believe it was.
Yeah, and Sheldon Brown. That was the game Sheldon Brown lit up Reggie Bush.
Yeah, that's right. The big hit.
Yeah. Right in the beginning of the game, yep. And
that was the last home playoff game they won, right?
What's that?
That game was in New Orleans, I think.
Oh, no, you're right. New Orleans. What the hell am I talking about?
Yes, it was. Yep. And I distinctly remember right after the game, right after the season was over, Garcia wanted to come back.
Yeah.
And he was at the Tropicana with his
his wife.
Girlfriend. I don't know if it was his wife or whatever. But
that model, right? Yeah. She was amazing. Or she still is, I'm sure. But my goodness. Yeah. I remember her, Dave.
Yeah.
How can you forget?
Jeff, you remember her? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Tracking him down at the Trop, and he was like, "Oh man, I'd love to come back here." But you're right. I mean, there's no way that they could bring him back. And
no.
And, you know.
Do you remember? And it was a ridiculous conversation then, and it still is a ridiculous conversation now. But they're typical social media nonsense, and I don't even know how big it was back then as far as like Twitter and whatnot. But you would have and the sports talk radio stuff as well about questioning Jeff Garcia's sexuality and this other nonsense.
Right.
Hey, you want to talk about a wedge buster to just completely kill any of those questions. You see who was on his arm. Yes. My goodness.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's the truth.
I do remember that whole scenario, though. When he was at the Trop, I do remember all of that where, basically he was like, yep, I want to come back. And it was like, there's no way they can bring him back because the fans will revolt. As soon as McNabb throws one in the ground, they're going to be like, get this guy out of here. And they're in that kind of situation possibly with their franchise quarterback, Carson Wentz.
What do you think
Foles.
It would take to get to that point?
Oh, man.
I don't. We weren't there this year. Carson had some pretty bad games, especially first halves, and you didn't hear people say, bench Carson, bring in Nick until the Rams game.
There was some.
Right.
I mean, before the Cowboys game, pardon me.
Yeah, I mean, Nick did start the first 2 games, and I thought he played pretty well in Tampa in particular. But, I think I think the fans are probably maybe. It's hard to say, but I think they're maybe even more behind Carson than they ever were with Donovan, which is wrong in my opinion. But
absolutely
I don't
wrong.
think that may be the case.
But you're right.
Dave, appreciate it, pal. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Dave.
All right, guys. Thanks
right.
for having me. I appreciate it.